local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are at the Oriskany battlefield. We're going to be talking about the battlefield, what happened here a long time ago, August 6, 1777. Our guest is Frank Tomaino, and who better to talk to about those events than Frank, local historian, author, and columnist for the Observer-Dispatch all these years. Frank, good to see you.
Great to be here, Joe.
What happened here really not only changed our area, changed New York State, but also changed the country.
Changed American history.
Yeah.
You know, all historians say the turning point in the Revolutionary War was the Battle of Saratoga, and it was, because it convinced the French to join us. But this battle site, the Battle of Oriskany, was an important part of the Battle of Saratoga. The British general Burgoyne, who surrendered at Saratoga, the Americans won the Battle of Saratoga. But after he returned to England, he said, if the British forces here at Oriskany, led by Colonel St. Ledger, if they had reached Albany and given him support, he might have won the Battle of Saratoga. Because they needed food, they needed supplies, and if St. Ledger had defeated the Americans here and proceeded east along the Mohawk Valley, you got to remember about 60% of the Mohawk Valley were loyalists. They still were loyal to the king, and they had farms, and they would have, St. Ledger would have picked up food, arms, and reached Albany with about 10,000 men. And if the British won the Battle of Saratoga, it would have changed American history.
It's all tied in, isn't it, Frank? The Battle of Oriskany, Saratoga, Fort Stanwix, it's all tied together.
Yeah.
And I know I've talked to superintendents at Fort Stanwix over the years, and they've all said that had this battle not happened, well, they've agreed with me anyway, that we'd be carrying British passports today.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, set the stage, Frank. So, August 6th, 1777, you had a group of militia coming from east of us.
Yeah, 40 miles away at Fort Dayton, which is now the village of Herkimer. General Herkimer was a brigadier general, and he was in charge of the Tryon County militia. And they got word that St. Ledger was at Oswego with about 2,000 men and 1,000 Senecas and Mohawk warriors, was going to head down towards Fort Stanwix and then invade the Mohawk Valley from the west and go to Albany. When he got word, Herkimer called for the militia. Men from 16 to 60 were part of that militia, and there were about 750 men. And they began to march from Fort Dayton, Herkimer, 40 miles away. By this time, the British had Fort Stanwix surrounded. So the purpose of Herkimer was to lift the siege of Fort Stanwix. When he got about where we are right now, about 6 miles east of Fort Stanwix, the Americans were ambushed by the British forces, which were about 100 loyalists and about 600 Mohawk and Seneca Indians. The American force had about 750 men plus 60 Oneida Indian warriors. So for the first time in history, you had three Native American groups fighting one another. They were all part of the Iroquois Confederacy.
Broke up that Confederacy.
Right, but now the Oneidas were siding with the Americans, our first allies, fighting and
Frank, I want to interrupt you right there because you mentioned the ambush, and if I recall my history correctly, the ambush happened right over there in that
Yeah.
gully, correct?
Yeah, there was a ravine there,
Yeah.
and that's where they were. That's where they were ambushed, and it truly was a bloody battle. Some say the bloodiest battle in the history of the United States. Hand-to-hand combat. I mean, everybody, they had hatchets, guns, bayonets. The grass was red with blood.
Yeah, there's a creek down there.
There was a
there used
creek.
to be a creek down there.
Yeah.
And they haven't been down there in years, but they say that creek ran red.
Ran red. It was really, really a bloody battle.
Yeah.
It was just terrible.
Yeah, there was no winner or loser to this battle, was there, Frank?
Not really. Herkimer, I would say the Americans sort of won. Their object was to lift the siege of Fort Stanwix. They didn't make it. But more important, St. Leger, the British colonel, his object was to reach Albany and reinforce the British forces there before the Battle of Saratoga. He was stopped cold here. And because the battle was so bloody, many of the Senecas and Mohawks who had sided with the British said, wait a minute, if they lost, the Senecas lost 5 important chiefs in this battle. So they said, if the Americans are fighting this hard here, can you imagine we're going to have to fight our way through the Mohawk Valley to Albany? It'll really be a bloodbath.
Yeah.
So what they did, they retreated to Oswego. Yeah.
One of the ways that I like to put it, Frank, is we won because we didn't lose here.
Yeah,
we
that's
fought them
good.
to a draw.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
And when we come back, let's talk about the monument behind you, the Oriskany Battlefield Monument, and we'll also talk some more. And I want to talk to you too about the movie that
Drums Along the Mohawk.
Drums Along the
Yeah,
Mohawk
yeah,
that depicts what happens here.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short break. Frank Tomaino is our guest. We're at the Oriskany Battlefield. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Frank, of course, has been chronicling history in this area for a long time. We're at the Oriskany Battlefield today, and we're chronicling what happened here on August 6, 1777. It was the big battle, turning point of the Revolutionary War. And Frank, the monument behind you was put up in what year?
It was dedicated August 6, 1884. And it was built mainly by the new Oneida Historical Society, which later became the Oneida County Historical Society and now the Oneida History Center. But
it was their first major project,
it was
right?
they were formed in 1876, the country's 100th birthday, and their first major project. This was farmland. For 100 years after the battle, farmers farmed this land. In fact, sometimes they would dig and they would see skeletons because there were still, a lot of bodies from the battles still here, and the society decided to purchase 5 acres where the battle was fought, and to build a monument. It was the society's first major project, and the man really responsible, he gets very little credit, is John Seymour, Horatio Seymour's brother.
And Horatio Seymour was the first president, was he not?
First president of the society, right? And John Seymour was chairman of the monument committee to build this. The big thing was they had to come up with the money. They needed $12,000 to $15,000 to purchase the land and build the monument. Well, 10 days after the battle in 1777, Congress, the Continental Congress, was meeting in York, Pennsylvania. They recognized how important this battle was. And they passed a bill 10 days after the battle to set aside $500 to build a monument to General Herkimer and the men who died here. The only problem is they had about $1.50 in the bank. They didn't have any money. So it was forgotten. Now it's 107 years later. The Historical Society is trying to build a monument. They found out about that bill that had been passed 100 years earlier.
Wasn't there one particular person that found a...
Yeah, the congressman from Rome, I'm forgetting his name. Yeah. But anyway, they went to him, and he introduced a bill. We want that $500 plus interest that it gathered in 100 years. It came to $4,100, and Congress gave it to him. The state gave them $3,000, and then you had people like Theodore Faxon, Thomas Proctor, gave $500, $1,000, and a lot of the relatives, most of the farmers, most of the American militia were made up of German-American farmers from the Mohawk Valley. In fact, at the first, when they dedicated, the Utica Manicore, still in existence, entertained here.
A German fraternal organization.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the relatives of some of the men who died and were wounded here donated $5, $10, $15, $20. And they were able to raise $12,000, $13,000 to buy the land and build a monument.
There's a famous picture, in fact, it's in this brochure that they hand out here at the Oriskany Battlefield, and it shows the Oriskany Battlefield on the day of the dedication.
Yeah, it was August 6th. It was a Wednesday. The battle was fought on a Wednesday, by the way. But on August 6th, 1884, they were going to dedicate the monument. And there were, they claimed, between 7,000 and 10,000 people right where we are right now. It was on the north side of the monument. And again, as I said, they were going to dedicate the women from St. Peter's Church in Oriskany had a table set up with refreshments, and it was just a great time.
Yeah. The battle itself, Frank, was, as you said, just so vicious, hand to hand. But what really turned this battle, you correct me if I'm wrong, was a rainstorm.
Yeah, the battle started about 10 in the morning, and the Americans had been surprised that they were just being slaughtered. About 11 o'clock, a thunderstorm, and everything stopped, which gave the Americans time to recoup. And Herkimer, who had been shot off his horse, his leg was shattered, and he was propped up against a tree, and he kept giving orders. And he gave orders to the Americans to fight in pairs. One would shoot the musket while the other was reloading. And so they began to be able to fight back. So that rainstorm, if it had not rained, I think by noon, the Americans just would have been slaughtered. Mm-hmm. So the rainstorm really did help,
And because the British and their allies were, I'm not sure what the right word is, it was more than discouraged, but by what happened here, Fort Stanwix was saved, and they never got into the fort.
No.
And
well, the fort, they never surrendered.
Yeah.
Colonel Peter Gainsworth, they didn't surrender. And after the Battle of Oriskany, the British continued the siege, but they had given up trying to go to Albany. But then, one of America's greatest heroes before he became a traitor, Benedict Arnold, one of our greatest generals before he became a traitor, came from Albany with a group of soldiers and lifted the siege of Fort Stanwix. Yeah.
And Benedict Arnold, if I recall my history correctly, came through this area and could smell what happened here miles away.
There were still bodies. I mean, when the Americans retreated after the battle ended about 3:30 in the afternoon, the British retreated, and the Americans started going back. They just left bodies. There were Out of 750, there were 450 Americans killed, wounded, and just captured. And many of the bodies were just here. It was just a bloody mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I've often wondered. I mean, they plowed these fields by farmers, but I don't know of any archaeological dig that they ever did here. You wonder what's under these lawns.
For some reason, I think Fort Stanwix did at one time.
Did they?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think they did once. But you're right. I imagine they would find quite a bit.
And I know you can't. There's signs around. You can't use metal detectors or anything here. But I just wonder what could be found here if something was done.
Yeah.
The people that are, and this is kind of a quandary. We've only got about 30 seconds, Frank, but it's kind of a quandary because you've got a federal thing going on at Fort Stanwix, National Park Service. Then you've got a state influence here. I don't know. It's
well, I interviewed Congressman Sherry Bollert 50 years ago when he first became congressman, and one of the things I remember he told me, he wanted the National Park Service to take this over from the state. For many years, the state neglected this place.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many years ago, the grass was this high.
Yeah.
Volunteers had to mow it. The state ignored it. That changed, and it's in beautiful shape now. But Bollert wanted this should be a national park. Although I think Fort Stanwix does do a lot of work here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we should point out that behind us, Frank, there's workmen out there, and they're putting in a new sidewalk so that you can get down to the little building that acts as a visitor center.
Yeah.
When we come back, let's talk about that movie, one of my favorite movies, and I know it's one of yours too.
Yeah.
Frank Tomaino is our guest. We're at the Oriskany Battlefield. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Frank's the guy we go to when we're talking local history. And local history happened here at the Oriskany Battlefield, August 6, 1777, a battle that turned the war and turned history around. Frank, the monument behind you, couple questions. Somewhere along the way, I seem to remember that some of those stones in the monument came from, was it the Shenango Canal?
The waylock at the Shenango Canal along State Street. Most of the granite came from the state of Maine. By the way, it's 85 feet tall.
Yeah.
And the base, well, the state not only contributed money, but they were dismantling the Shenango Canal at that time, the locks. And there was a lock on State Street in Oriskany. And so the base, some of the granite on the base is from the waylock of the Shenango Canal. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
The state donated it. Yeah.
The movie that I talk about, Jumps Along the Mohawk, great movie written by a local author, Walter D. Edmonds from Boonville, and it loosely depicts what happened
you
here.
don't see the battle.
Yeah.
You see Henry Fonda is the star in Claudette Colbert, and Henry Fonda is one of the American militiamen that follows General Herkimer here. And in the movie, you see them marching off here. And then you hear about the ambush and the battle, but you don't see it. And then you do see them straggling back,
Mm-hmm.
the wounded.
He was one of the last ones.
He was one of the last ones. So you don't actually see the battle, or hear. He didn't actually describe the battle, but he did describe them leaving Fort Dayton, Herkimer, and then returning.
Interestingly enough, Frank, that movie, great movie that it was not filmed here.
Oh no, in fact, Walter D. Edmonds, who again was from Boonville, he got $25,000 for the, this is 1938, for the rights, a lot of money. And John Ford, the great director, it was a top movie. I mean, you had, you know, Fonda and Claudette Colbert and John Ford.
Ward Bond.
Yeah, and Ward Bond. And Edmonds, two things bothered him. Number one, it was filmed in California, and the trees they used weren't trees like, you know, we have here. And they had a fence in the movie that wasn't like the fence that they used to build here in the Mohawk Valley. But the thing that really irritated him, in the movie, Henry Fonda and Claudette Colbert get married in Albany at 10 in the morning. And then they're going to go to their new home in Deerfield, you know, near where Utica is today. And on their wagon, they got their wagon, they're dragging a cow along. And in the movie, they get from Albany to Deerfield in one day. And Edmund said there's no way you're going to go from Albany to Deerfield with a cow in a wagon in one day. But other than that, it's a great movie.
Yeah. And did Edmonds like the movie? Did he enjoy the movie?
He said, yeah, he enjoyed the movie. Yeah, how could he not enjoy it? But there were just little, he was a nitpicker anyway, and there was just a few things that bothered him. But no, he enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made him you know, $25,000 then is probably, you know, worth $300,000-$400,000 today.
Yeah. Is there anything about the battle, Frank, that through your research you haven't been able to come up with an answer to? Is there anything that's been making you curious about this battle?
Well, not really. I'm just trying to think. Not really. Everything's been covered pretty well. You know, Herkimer being wounded, how they got him back.
How many days did he go when he got back to?
I think he died. Well, actually, they thought he would recover. He shattered his leg, but when he got back to Herkimer, a young doctor who was with Benedict Arnold's group as they were heading west, a young doctor said, "We're going to have to amputate the leg." And other later historians say that he really didn't have to, but he amputated the leg, and somehow he didn't tie the arteries together, and Herkimer bled to death. I hate to say it, but he bled to death because this inexperienced doctor just didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah. The you know, I've often thought how amazing that these militiamen, who, as you say, were farmers. Nothing against farmers, but farmers aren't known for their military fighting ability.
They were not professional soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, they used to train, you know, as all militias do, like a National Guard today, but even lesser so in those days. And they were up against, of course, the British, other than the Senecas and Mohawks. They had professional British soldiers, loyalists. And one thing we ought to bring up in this battle, you had really brothers fighting brothers. It was really a civil war. You had many in the Mohawk Valley who remained loyal to the King of England and fighting other members of the family who favored independence. And right here at Oriskany, they fought. And I'm sure there's no way to prove this, brother fighting brother and killing brother.
Yeah.
It was really tragic. Yeah.
I know you've read it. I've read it so many times that I can't remember what it says. But there is a plaque on that monument down below where you can read. Do you recall it's on that plaque?
Well, I know it was written by a Professor Edward North. He was professor, I believe, history at Hamilton College. He was asked to write. Yeah, I forget what it says, but it is written by Professor Edward North. Yeah.
Back when we get done, maybe we'll go over and take a look at it to refresh our memories. And there is a visitor center here. It's closed now though because they're putting in this a new sidewalk and you can't get to it. But you know, I've seen people in the summertime come up here and pack a picnic lunch and sit here and.
You know, like I say, You know, it's kind of sad. Kids today, I think, know about the Battle of the Alamo, Gettysburg, Custer's Last Stand, but not about the Battle of Oriskany. And that's sad because this battle was just as important.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Always good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
Yep. And better being in the studio, I guess, on
that's
a day
right,
like
yeah.
today, right, Frank? That's going to do it for us today, but we'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. In fact, you know, one of the places we ought to go to, Frank, I'm just thinking while I was talking, General Herkimer's house down down in Herkimer, still in great shape.
Yeah.
Don't forget CNYhomepage.com. There's lots of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.